Today, we're going to talk about using samples and Pro Tools when we're building out a song, and I'm going to use Splice as my example. All right, so this is actually a Patreon request. So if you want to request a topic for a video, please check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/CatoNoise. And the request for this video was actually, I'm going to read it. I'm just going to read it word for word. It was, I have been playing with Splice samples, but it's pretty tricky to select, download, bring them into a Pro Tools session at the right BPM. Could you do a YouTube video about that? So sure, I would love to do a video on this topic. And thank you so much to the Patreon patron that put in this topic request. Okay, so I'm starting out. I made a brand new YouTube example session for 2025. We have a master fader. I have not done anything in this session besides create that master fader. So usually when I'm going to start a beat or work on a song, if it is not already set, I will set my tempo. So I'm just going to pick a tempo. Let's do like 90 BPM. Maybe like a little more mellow, you know? And then you'll probably want to pick your key too. So I'm just going to pick a random key here. I'll do A major. So once I have set my tempo and my key, I'll usually create a click track. And that kind of just helps us have a sense of what's going on. It's useful for later on in the process when you have people recording with your beat, stuff like that. So this is usually kind of how things start to form. A lot of times I'll also import session data from previous sessions, but I'm going to jump right into using samples just so we can jump straight to that topic of conversation. So I'm in Splice. One of the first things I often look for is something like a kick sample. So I'm just going to find one really quickly. This one's kind of fun. Let's do this one. It doesn't really matter which one I use right now. So what I do is I click on the plus button and that adds it to my library. I might also like it. Sometimes I'll like numerous samples. So I might go through and listen to a bunch and be like, oh, this one sounds good. Like maybe I like that one. I'll add it to my likes and so on. And so then when I look at my likes, it has the most recently liked sounds here. So it has this one and this one. And so now I can A/B test, right? Compare the two that I liked and see which one I might want to choose. So maybe I actually want to choose this one, right? And we see it's actually already in my library. So I've actually used this one before. So once you pick which one you want to make sure that's in your library. This is the button that actually uses those credits. So the credits are on the top right of the screen here. And then what you do is you click on this little 3 dots. Is it like the shish kebab? I think it's like the shish kebab. So you click on that. And then what I do is show enclosing folder. And so here's the folder. I've obviously used this one before. I've used something similar before. But so here it is. It's the one-shot brighteners. And I can double check if I want here, right? So if I hover over here, it shows me the full file name. That's the one that I'm looking at. So here's the file. And now the question is, how do you bring it into Pro Tools, right? So what you can do is you can do that file import audio, right? And you can go through and import your audio that way. If you're going through that screen, though, you have to go search and find the file on your computer, which is a bit of a pain, right? So I actually don't use this method when I'm using samples off Splice specifically. Oftentimes I don't use this method if I'm using samples because I'll drag from wherever the sample is into the session. If you do use this method, you do want to make sure that you hit copy or convert when you go to import instead of clicking add, because then if you move your session elsewhere, you might be missing your audio file if you only clicked add, and that's because it adds it to your session from wherever it is on your computer, and then it might not get moved with the whole session folder. So I have videos about that though, so I'm not going to dig into that. What I do like to do is I make sure that my clips view is open here. So my clips list is open and you can adjust the width of that clip list. But you just want to make sure it's open. And then I do Command Tab to go to my Finder. And then I find the file and all I do is I hold Option, which would be Alt on a Windows machine, I believe. And I click and drag it into my clip list. So now it's in my session. What Option does is it makes sure that your file gets converted properly. So it's not getting messed up by the sample rate conversion, for example. So always hold Option or Alt. There are some ways to adjust in your settings and Pro Tools so that you don't have to do that. But this is just a safe way to do it, is to hold Option or Alt while you do that. And then what I'll do is I'll look at the clip. So here, if you look at this little triangle here, there's actually a triangle here, right? Which means that it's a stereo file. So just looking at this, I know that this is a stereo file because it has this triangle, which means there's a drop down for the left and the right channel. So now that I know that's a stereo file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Command-Shift-N to create a new track. I'm going to hold Command and hit the right arrow to go to stereo, audio track. And sometimes at this stage, I'll name the file. So I might be like kick or kick 1, right? And I want to make sure my inputs and outputs I want to make sure they're correct, right? And then all I have to do is drag this into my timeline. So now I have a session with the tempo set. I have my kick imported. I have a click track. Let's listen to it. Awesome. Okay, so great. So you'll notice I'm in grid mode. So it is showing me my bars and beats. So it's snapping these to the beat right now. And I set that value for what my grid value is up here. So if you click on this little triangle here, you can adjust it to, for example, a quarter note if I just want it to be quarter notes, or sometimes I set it to just bars when I'm like duplicating whole sections of the song. I'm just going to do quarter notes for now. I'm going to hit copy. Actually, before I hit copy, I'm going to bring this down by a few dB because they tend to make these really loud. So usually I want to bring this down. 6 is kind of more than I tend to. Maybe 5 or 4 is usually it. And then I also, just for like good habits to avoid a speaker pop, I often will add a fade. I might adjust the actual timing to get it a little closer to the actual beat here. And then what I'll do is I might copy and paste for a bar. And then I might highlight a whole bar and hit Command D to duplicate. And then I get my loop going pretty quickly. Once I have this set how I want it, I'll often then go in and I will hold Command. And since I'm highlighting on the bottom half of the track here while I'm in the Smart tool with all 3 of these highlighted, I can click and drag and get it a little more on the beat there for me. But for the sake of like duplicating and putting things on the beat, I often will wait to do that, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I have this kick in place. I'll often bring this fader down too, because you want to leave enough headroom for everything else that you're going to add. And that's kind of how I do the one shots, right? And get them to the beat. But I think the question was more about how to adjust things to the tempo when you're getting like a melodic sample, for example, or some kind of a sample that's more than just a one shot, something that's longer. So I'll show you that. Let's do Command Tab to go to Splice, and let's search for like a keys, something or other. And let's set the key to what were we A major? I think we're A major. Let me double check. Yeah, A major. So A major, hit close. Let's hit play. That's nice. Okay, I'm just going to pick one. So I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to add it to my library. I'm going to show and closing folder. So this is the same process. And I'm just going to do Command Tab, and I'm going to drag it in. So I know it's in my key, which is good. I don't have to adjust it for my key, but you'll notice here it says 120. So I think this is in 120 BPM. It's a stereo file. See how it has that drop down? So I'm going to do Command Shift N. I'm going to do a stereo audio track. And let me call this keys. I'll often also change the color of these tracks as I go. And I'm just going to drag it in. So I'm going to actually add a little marker here to be like my start location. So here we are. It's in 120 BPM, so it's not going to match BPM-wise. Let's hit play. But the thing about this is that oftentimes these loops, and I'm going to kind of like bring this down a little bit just so we can view the waveform a little better. That's just visual. It's not affecting the level or anything. But a lot of times these loops are in, for example, they might be 4 measures or 8 measures long. Usually it's like some kind of measure amount that makes sense. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll look at either the grid as it is now, or I'll even set it to 1 bar and be like, all right, what's 4 measures? So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 measures. This is 120 BPM, so it's going to be faster than what I have. So I might want to stretch this out to make it slower, right? So I might want to stretch this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I can also do this without counting it that way. If I swap my main counter to bars and beats, it shows me the length of my highlight now. So that's 8 measures. So I know that this amount of space here is 8 measures. So this is just a little shorter than that. So maybe if I stretch it out, it'll make it slower, which will match the adjustment from 120 to 90. And it'll fit a nice 8 measure loop. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up here to my trim tool. I'm going to click and hold on it. I'm going to choose TCE. So that stands for time compression and expansion. And so what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to then take this file and I'm going to stretch it out. And since I am in grid mode and my grid is set to 1 measure, it's going to snap it to that measure line for me. and I can see my highlight's still at 8 measures. So this thing is all 8 measures now. And if I switch back, I'm going to switch back just so I don't forget that I'm on the TCE tool, because that actually it makes a whole new audio file. So it's a destructive process. So it's making a whole new audio file for me. You can see it says time shift here. So now it's been adjusted to that that measure amount. So let's listen. So it sounds a little weird, right? It's a little off. I'd probably want to tweak it a little bit, but that's basically the idea of how you do it. And like we might want to, for example, look at where this is falling and maybe make it vibe with the kick a little bit better. I might also adjust the kick in terms of when it's actually hitting to match this vibe, but that's kind of the idea of how you do it, right? So now I might take this and duplicate it, and now I have an 8 measure loop with this file. So I can show you again. Let's do another one. Let's try, what's this at, 106? Let's try this one. So show and closing folder. And then I'm going to switch to Pro Tools and then Command Tab to switch to the Finder. I'm going to hold Option, click and drag. And so maybe what I might want to do is let's try duplicating this and making this inactive, and we'll just try this one out instead. And this one was 106. So let's do the same thing. Swap to the TCE tool, stretch it out, see how we like it. And at some point I mute the click, and you can do that by muting it. I often mute it so that it still goes to the headphones, because I'll have it sending to headphones. Or you can hit 7 on your numeric keypad. So I just hit 7 and that muted it. It's kind of fun. And again, I would bring this down. I'd bring the actual volume fader down as well, just to help have good gain staging practices, and set my output here. Okay, so that's kind of how I do things. I'm going to name this keys 2, actually. So now that I have this set, right, I can do the same thing that I did with the kick. So if I highlight that range of time, I'm going to do semicolon to go down. Remember, P is up, semicolon's down, and it retains your highlight. And then I'm going to hit Command D. And I do that so I know that my highlight is actually on a measure amount and not on, on a grid value and not on the actual audio file length. But you can just do that and duplicate it. And then let's say maybe this is a chorus and you want this muted and you want something else active there. You can do that. So oftentimes I'll do stuff like this. It'll end up looking like that. Although I tend to not use samples like this nowadays. I've had some things that I've used samples like this on, but mostly I'm using one-shots and things that are easier for copyright purposes, right? So one thing that I also do while we're talking about using Splice samples and everything, I'm going to close this out, is if I'm creating something, I'm going to go to my likes folder here. So if I'm creating something that I want to be sync friendly, that I want to be able to have copyright protection on, that I want to be able to sell and not get in legal trouble, right? Oftentimes I'm doing one-shots like the kick and the snare. I'm using samples like that more than like complex melodic samples that are more copyrightable. So what I'll do for songs like that is I'm going to actually open my Finder here. I have an old version of this in this Clance and Imes folder, but I have a sample licenses folder that I'll copy. And here's my YouTube example 2025. And I will paste it in the session folder. And then I get rid of all these old certificates because this is for the other track. And then I'll open this up. And this is kind of what I do. So I will refresh this. And I'll just call this YouTube example. But this is a good idea just to cover yourself legally. A lot of people probably don't have to worry about this, right? But for example, I use that kick. So let's go find the kick. So in my folder here, which one is it? That's a keys track. Let's find that kick here. So here's the kick. So I will click on it to get the file name and hit copy. And then I'll paste it here. I'll have from Splice. And then what you do is you want to get your certified license. So I'm going to go to Splice. This is the kick sample that I used, I believe. So I will go to Sounds. And it should be in here. Is this the one? OSOG kick, baby. Zen MFE one shot. No, that is not the one. That's the other one that I looked at. So what I want to look for is this Zen underscore MFY. So I'm going to search for that. So search Zen underscore MFY, see what pops up. So here we go. So let's find it. It's one of these two files. That's the Organica one. I want the Brighteners one. So one shot Brighteners. So this is the file. So once I find it in my sounds, you have to find it in your sounds tab over here. You click here and you go generate certified license. And then you just type in your full legal name, your artist or producer name. So I'm just going to actually, I hate this name. So never call me this, but all right. No one calls me that. Okay. So generate certified license. And then you hit download. And so now if I go to my downloads folder, let me grab it out of there really quick. I'm just going to paste it in here. So I just copied it from my downloads folder. I'm going to hit paste. And so now it's right there in my folder. I will also select the name and hit copy. And then I will put it into this document for me. So now I have that, and I would do the same thing for the other two samples. And I will put right here is always the actual track name in the Pro Tools session. So I have it ready to go. And then I hit save and I close it out when I'm done working on the beat. So I'm going to actually close this out now. So let me know if you have any questions about that. That's kind of how I protect myself legally. So I have that list ready to go. If someone's like, oh, do you have the licenses for all the samples you used? And I'm like, yes, they were one shots. They were used for these purposes. And this is the whole list of them, So that's what I do. The other thing that might be an issue, right, is adjusting if you find a sample you like that's in a different key, right? So let me go to Splice and find something that's in a completely different key. So let's try strings and let's go for any key. So here's a C minor key. No, let's do a major key. Let's click on this and do major because we're in major. I just went through like a few of them. All right, I'm going to swap to this one. Let's try this one. So show and closing folder, Pro Tools, and then to the Finder, doing Command Tab. I'm holding Option and dragging it in. I have this track ready to go here. I'm going to drag it on. Oh, this is a mono track. See how it doesn't have that triangle? So now I'm going to have to do new track, mono audio. Let's adjust our output here. Let's try this one. This one might be a good one. Okay, so it's at 80 BPM. I'm going to adjust the tempo really quick. Let's see how that goes. Make it a little quicker, right, to match our 90 BPM tempo. And so now this is in B major. It also says B major here. And you can also, like I use sometimes to double check, I will use the auto tune, auto key. And you can just place it on the track. All right, so it thinks it's E major. So this is something I'd have to look into more is to figure out what actual key it's in, right? But let's say that it's in E major, right? So when you look at the piano keys, right, E major, the first note of E major is E, right? And we are in A major. And so the first note of A major is A, right? So if we go and we add this pitch shift plugin, which is what I'm looking for here. Let me actually run a search. Pitch 2. What I will do is I will think about that, right? So I'm going to hold shift and open this so we can look at both at the same time. We are going from E major in theory to A major. So we go from E, maybe we'll go up. You have to decide whether you want to go up or down, right? So E, F, G, A. So here's where the A is, right? So to get to A from E, we have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones. So we could do that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones. And if this is right, if this is the correct key for what it is in, then it should work. And the thing here is, like, if you have to shift too far, then it often will sound weird. So it doesn't always work perfectly, but that's kind of the idea here. So it's like really high pitched, right? So I might then, adjust things accordingly. But that's kind of how I handle things that are not in the right key. I tend to prefer to just find things that are in the right key and go with that. If I'm doing anything melodic, oftentimes the melodic stuff I'm not taking a sample from anyway. I am, using an instrument preset or something else, and I'm actually building the notes myself. So this is not something I do super frequently. Every so often I do have to do this. And the reason why this works, right, is because when we talk about any kind of key, like major or minor, they're going to be basically you have a starting note and then you have a series of whole and half steps. And depending on that combo of whole and half steps, it's either going to be a major key or it's going to be a minor key. And that's what dictates what notes are within that key. So if you want to shift to a new key, you can take everything and just shift it up or down by the amount that you need to get to that key. So that's the basic idea. I don't have a ton of time to go into more music theory, but that's kind of the idea. Let me know if that makes sense, if you want more details on that. Sometimes it works. It depends on like how far you're trying to go and like how far the key is from the key that you're starting in and stuff like that, but it does tend to work. So that's that. So yeah, that's kind of it. The other thing that I used to do is I used to use the bridge plugin that Splice has. That is actually a VST plugin. So it's made, it doesn't, automatically work with Pro Tools. But what I would do is I would put that within a VST wrapper and I would use it that way. And it wasn't perfect, but it would work. I think I have a video on that. So I'll actually put a link to that in the description, a card on the screen, whatever. So you can check that out if you want. I noticed that when I switched to this M1 computer, that stopped working. So I no longer do that. And then the other thing that I tend to do is I will hit play on the beat that I'm working on, and then I'll go to Splice and I'll listen to things in context because they will sound different in context. So it's important to do that. You kind of have to be a little bit, have a little bit of mental creativity because like the tempos and stuff aren't going to line up, but that helps me match textures and get textures that I want, textures that I like that work within the context of the piece that I'm working on. So I hope that helps. But yeah, that's about it. I hope you like this video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I hope you all had a good holiday season, a good New Year's. Yeah, and again, if you want to put in a topic request, please feel free to comment below or check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/CatoNoise. And I come out with new videos every Wednesday. And thank you so much for hanging out. Okay. My friend Barrett got me this Jurassic Park hoodie, and I'm really excited about it because I am a huge Jurassic Park fan. So I am living in this thing right now. If you're going to NAMM and you want to meet up, let me know. I'm going to be, it seems like I'm going to be, fingers crossed, speaking on a panel. So I'm really excited for that. And then I will be available for meetings. I usually do meetings like the whole time, and I'll go to a few talks and stuff like that. But yeah, hit me up if you want to meet at NAMM, you want to hang out at NAMM. I love to see people and be nerds and all that stuff. I know that sounds corny, but it's true. Okay. I hope you're all doing well. Bye.